All right, then we move now to item 713, which is the Upper Des Plaines Impact Study presentation. And this begins the opening of the 30-day public comment period. And just a couple of things, if I may, before we get into this. This is actually the first time that the Commission has seen this presentation in its entirety. We've had a couple of updates along the way. We actually commissioned this study back in, I think it was June of last year. And what I'd like to do, Mike and I have been through this with Christopher Burke and Associates. It's a lengthy presentation. It's very detailed and technically oriented. We've asked that each of the slides be numbered. So if you have comments relative to the presentation, if you are referencing a particular slide, please take that number down during the presentation along with your comments. So in the interest of time, we can move along. The presentation, I think, is probably going to take 45 minutes or so.
I can comment too.
Okay, I'll let you comment in just a second now. We're going to have the commissioners, as I say, they will have a chance to have their questions and comments first, and then we'll open it up to the general public. We ask again that your comments be specific to the stormwater management issues, and we'll take it forward from there. Okay, Mike?
Very quickly, I wanted to, by way of introduction, I think it's important to inform the Commission and the public of the qualifications and experience of the study team. There was 4 individuals from Christopher Burke Engineering working on this study. Chris Burke is the president of Chris Burke Engineering. His education includes a Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, and a PhD in Civil Engineering. Includes 36 years of civil engineering experience. He's got professional engineering registration in 4 states, including Illinois and Wisconsin. 2 of Chris's many certifications include a certified professional in erosion control and a diplomat of water resources engineering. Chris also serves as an expert witness in court and is a professor of practice at UIC for the last 17 years. Darren Olson, who will do the presentation tonight, is a project manager for the study. He's the Assistant Water Resources Department Head at CBBL. His education includes Master's in Business Administration, a Bachelor's of Science, and Master's of Science in Civil Engineering. He's got 21 years of experience. He's a professional engineer in Illinois and Iowa, and his certifications also include a Diplomat in Water Resources Engineer, Certified Floodplain Manager, and a Certified Professional in Erosion and Sediment Control. Jed Anderson is also here tonight. He's the Vice President and Head of Environmental Resources Department at Burke Engineering. Jed has 30 years of experience in wetland sciences. Jed's certification includes professional wetland scientist. He's also a certified professional in erosion control. He's a certified wetland specialist in 3 counties and a designated erosion control inspector. Jerry Robinson, also from Burke Engineering, is a water resource project manager with 33 years of engineering experience. He is a professional engineer licensed in Illinois and is a certified floodplain manager. On the SMC side of the project, Kurt Wolford, as you met earlier, is the chief engineer at Lake County Stormwater Management. Kurt has his professional engineering degree, certified floodplain manager, and designated erosion control inspector with 18 years of experience. I also worked on the study. I'm the director for Lake County SMC. I've got 34 years of water resources engineering experience. I've also got a professional engineering degree and I'm a certified floodplain manager as well. Thanks, Darren.
Darren, you're on.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, commissioners. We're going to start tonight with an overview of our study, a summary of the material that we reviewed, a description of the EITM zone, and how it fits into the Des Plaines River watershed. We'll go into some existing site conditions and depressional storage, move on to stormwater detention analysis, go into floodplain review, review the soil erosion and sediment control measures on the construction sites that we saw, move into wetlands and waters of the U.S. impacts and mitigation, and finally wrap up with our recommendations tonight. We also will have some commonly used terms. These are engineering terms and some acronyms. We heard some earlier today. We'll hear some more during our presentation tonight. Acre foot is a measurement that engineers use for water. Is equivalent to 1 acre of land, which we can all generally envision 1 acre of land, 1 foot deep with water. So that's 1 acre foot is equal to approximately 326,000 gallons of water. We also have a flow rate measurement, a volumetric flow rate measurement in cubic feet per second. Again, that's measuring the flow rate of water, whether it's in a river or out of a detention pond. We've heard 100-year storm event earlier tonight. It is not a storm event that occurs once every 100 years. It is a storm event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. And finally, an acronym that we'll see tonight is Sewer PAC. That is an agency that is in Wisconsin that does a wide range of work. They're the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. So the material that we reviewed was very lengthy. I've included a slide here with a summary of that. We reviewed stormwater management permit applications. The second bullet is probably one of the most important conference calls with Wisconsin DNR, with Sewer PAC, with the Village of Mount Pleasant, and with WisDOT. So we did coordinate with them as issues came up with our study, as we needed more data. We were coordinating with those agencies across the border. We did complete some site inspections of the Foxconn site, which is within the EITM zone and the adjacent roadway developments. Looked at some land use plans, all sorts of state, local, and federal regulations for stormwater, floodplain, and wetlands. Topographic mapping was reviewed in detail. Floodplain modeling for the Des Plaines River that was completed for FEMA and also for the study in 2018 by Sewer PAC. Looked at Wisconsin DOT roadway plans and stormwater calculations, local road plans, and then a wide range of wetlands information from everything from jurisdictional determinations to permitting documents to mitigation documents. So it's important to talk first about the EITM zone and what that is. It's the Electronics Information Technology Manufacturing Zone. And the exhibit on the right shows the location and configuration of the EITM zone. And that zone is generally shown in the green outline. It's approximately just over 4,000 acres. The roadway that is running north-south on the left side of this is Interstate 94 in Wisconsin. This is just as you're crossing from Kenosha County into Racine County. We'll see variations of this map quite a bit tonight. We have Area 2, which is the northern area, Area 1, which is the southern area, and Area 3, which is the eastern area. The EITM zone was created by Wisconsin Act 58 in 2017, and it exempted the EITM zone from several environmental regulations. The first was, this is considered a major development in Wisconsin. Major developments in Wisconsin have to complete a state environmental impact statement. This project did not have to. Through the Wisconsin DNR wetland permitting, this allowed for fill of wetlands within the EITM zone. They had to be mitigated at a 2-to-1 ratio. This also waived the water quality certification required for those wetland impacts. For additional DNR permitting for stream activities that were waived, construction of bridges and culverts, waived restrictions for placement of fill in navigable streams, enlargement of waterways and bank protection, as well as straightening of waterways. These are the major items that were exempted in the EITM zone as part of this act. It's also important to know where the EITM zone is in relation to the Des Plaines River watershed, and that's the main focus of this tonight is that portion that's within the Des Plaines River watershed. You can see here in red at the far north side of this exhibit on the right is where the EITM zone is at. That includes the development itself, which is a square shape, as well as you can see Interstate 94 that's running north and south. It is in a sub-watershed of the Des Plaines River in Wisconsin that straddles the Kenosha and Racine County line. That is called the Kilbourne Road Ditch. That's the wording there in blue. That drains south and then meets up with the Des Plaines River, which is the longer blue line that is running from the west, then generally runs south. And we see how it crosses from Kenosha County into Lake County. I've included where we're at tonight, which is the College of Lake County. We're also in the Des Plaines River watershed as well. The Kilbourne Road Ditch sub-watershed, which is where this development is located, is approximately 24 square miles. The Des Plaines River watershed in whole within Wisconsin is 125 square miles, and the Des Plaines River watershed within Lake County is approximately 200 square miles. This is all to give you perspective. The EITM zone and related development within the Des Plaines River watershed is approximately 3.3 square miles. But the Des Plaines River watershed, of course, does not end at Lake County. It continues south as watersheds and water flow don't conform to political boundaries. It continues to move south from Lake County into Cook County, clips a part of DuPage County, eventually Will County, before ending right before Grundy County as it merges with the Kankakee River to continue downstream in the Illinois River. And at that point, there is a drainage area of over 2,000 square miles. We've also shown the Foxconn development, again, at the very far north in the headwaters of this watershed. So zooming back in a little bit to the EITM zone and the supporting development, this is really taking a look at what is in the Des Plaines River watershed. And again, we're seeing the familiar three areas. The line in blue on the map is the Des Plaines River watershed boundary, and specifically the Kilbourne Road Ditch subwatershed boundary. The total area located within the EITM zone and supporting development within the watershed is 3.3 square miles. Area 2, which is the northern area, and Area 1, approximately 1,500 acres of those two areas are within the Des Plaines River watershed. The local road improvements, which are a large part of the project, there's 148 acres of local road improvements. Those local roads include Durand Avenue, which is running on the north side of the EITM zone, Braun Road, which is running through the center in an east-west direction through the EITM zone, and then County Line Road, which is also called Highway KR, is on the south side, running in an east-west direction. These are all under the temporary jurisdiction of Wisconsin Department of Transportation for the construction of this project, and then they'll be turned back over to local jurisdictions. Like I said, some of the right-of-ways here are very, very wide, 200-foot wide right-of-ways. The roads are generally where they currently exist, the roads are being expanded from small farm roads to very large 6-vehicle lane roadways with pedestrian paths on either side. And there is one new roadway, which is Wisconsin Valley Way. That runs in a north-south direction parallel to 94, which is the large road running north-south in this exhibit. It has a serpentine sort of shape. That's a brand new road. That'll be a 4-vehicle lane road. That's again a right-of-way of 200 feet wide. That's also part of this development. In addition, I-94, if anyone has driven up that direction, is completely being reconstructed. There's an addition of 1 lane in each direction. Frontage roads are being expanded. The bridges are being expanded and being heightened to allow additional traffic to pass under them. And in the Des Plaines River watershed, this is approximately 6.7 linear miles of I-94 that's being improved. Also 420 acres. So a tremendous amount of interstate improvement also occurring as part of this. And it's important when we look at that interstate improvement to look at kind of where that fits within the EITM zone, but also within some potential development corridors in this area. The map to the right is a land use map for the Des Plaines River watershed in Wisconsin. And the yellow areas are areas that are currently agricultural. So we can see that there is, within the Des Plaines River watershed, 57% is still currently agricultural. Within the Kilbourne Road sub-watershed, 63% is still agricultural. When we look at a little bit more information, the two maps to the left show blow-ups of the areas that are in red on the map to the right. And they start to show what are some potential future development plans adjacent to the EITM zone. And these are ones that have been produced by Sewer PAC, which is the Regional Planning Commission, as well as Kenosha County for their 2035 land use map. And some of the colors here, the gray up in the upper left map is industrial development, and much of the red and pink in the lower map from Kenosha County is industrial and commercial development as well. So when we total this up and we look at those areas in red, which are approximately a half mile on either side of I-94, there's approximately 5.5 square miles of additional area that could be developed. This is largely between the EITM zone and Kenosha Airport along this corridor where I-94 is being improved. So taking a step back now, we'll go into some detail of the areas that we reviewed specific to Foxconn. And these are areas that are currently under construction. So we've been out to the site for site inspections. These areas are currently under construction, and these are the areas that we have plans and stormwater reports and wetland reports for. So this is the focus of our study was on these areas. And they include Phase 1 within Area 1 of Foxconn. And we've seen before what Area 1 is of Foxconn. It's the southern area on this exhibit here. But then the first phase of that is called Phase 1. So this is the start of Foxconn. But it's still a very large development. It's 816 acres in size. It straddles the Lake Michigan and Des Plaines River watershed boundary, so approximately 420 acres are in the Lake Michigan watershed, and 395 are within the Des Plaines River watershed, and that was the focus of our study, was on that 395 acres. There are two proposed detention basins. That current development has some floodplain along the western side, which is why that boundary of Phase 1 along the western side kind of moves in and out. It's avoiding the floodplain. There's also a little bit over 13 acres of wetland impact as part of that. The second main area that we reviewed were the local roads. Again, these were 148 acres. They have multiple detention basins. They do have 3 roadway crossings of Kilbourne Road Ditch, which impact floodplain. And there's also 4.3 acres of wetland and waters impact as part of the local road improvements. And finally, I-94 within Des Plaines River watershed is 420 acres. They have multiple detention basins and just over 21 acres of wetland and waters impact. And we're going to get into these numbers that you see here in a lot more detail in the next slides. So when we began to look at the development in detail, we looked first at the existing land uses and existing topography. And this area in Wisconsin has some similarities with Lake County. The topography was formed by the glaciers, and so there's what we call undulating glacial topography. And right now, most of it, as you can see from this aerial, which is from 2017, before the development started, much of the area was agricultural and drain-tiled, like much of Lake County is. Here we also see the floodplain is the blue. And when we then take that aerial photograph and this information and we strip away the photo and we overlay then the topography, we get the exhibit that we see on the right. And this is using the aerial topography and performing digital analysis of that aerial topography to find out where the depressional areas are. These are the areas that during rain events would store water. We see many of them here in Lake County, and we know how important they are to a natural watershed by the functions that they perform. And so what we were able to do was to use that the aerial topography to quantify how much depressional storage. And so we did it for these four areas that you see, the local roads, which are the areas shown in pink, have approximately 16.9 acre feet of existing depressional storage within those corridors, obviously before this land was developed. The other one of importance is phase one within the EITM zone 1 is 43 acre feet of existing depressional storage that was on the land. The remainder of EITM zone 1, which is shown in yellow, was another 40 acre feet, and EITM zone 2 was 56.2 acre feet. So when we total all of that existing depressional storage area up for this area that's within the Des Plaines River watershed, it's 156.1 acre feet of existing depressional storage. Within phase one in the local roads, which is the area that we analyzed in detail because we have the plans for that, it is approximately 59.9 acre feet of existing depressional storage. So that is the peach color there on the right, and then all the pink, which is the local roads. That's the summation of those two. And we'll see this number, 59.9 acre feet, again in this presentation. So our next step was to start to quantify the stormwater detention. And this schematic here shows just for phase one of Foxconn, which is that 395 acres that's in the Des Plaines River watershed, the stormwater detention, and then we also added in the depressional storage that would be required. And the graphs, or the text to the right shows the difference in the different regulations for stormwater detention between this area that's being developed in Wisconsin and Lake County. This area in Wisconsin is generally governed by sewer PAC's requirements for stormwater detention. And those use Atlas 14 rainfall, which is 5.84 inches of rain for the 100-year event, and they use a release rate of 0.3 CFS per acre. So using that, the minimum volume for this Foxconn phase one area for detention would be 122 acre feet of stormwater detention that would be required just for the development. We looked at what they were providing. They're providing just slightly more than that, 125 acre feet of detention is what's being provided when we reviewed their plans. What we wanted to do then was to look at what would be required in Lake County, and this is where the differences in the regulations become apparent. In Illinois, we use Bulletin 70 rainfall data, which was developed by the Illinois State Water Survey, and that 100-year rainfall depth is 6.5 inches. So that's the rainfall depth that we're using here to size our stormwater detention. The release rate that we use is 0.15 CFS per acre. We also make curve number adjustments for compaction of the ground. So when we add all that up and do an analysis to determine how much detention volume would have been required if this were to be developed in Lake County, that is 139 acre feet. So that difference of 17 acre feet in the requirements is due largely to a lower release rate here in Lake County and a higher rainfall amount. What we did then is we added on the depressional storage requirements. So that's the last box up on the top. And if we add in, like we do here in Lake County, we add in the depressional storage on top of that stormwater detention, what would be required here in Lake County for Foxconn phase one would have been 182 acre feet of total stormwater storage. So that's a net delta, as we see on the left-hand side there, a net difference of 60 acre feet from what is required in Wisconsin to what would be required here in Lake County. So that's a number we're also going to see again because we did a similar analysis for the local roads. And so this table here summarizes both the stormwater detention analysis and the depressional storage analysis for Foxconn phase one and the local roads within the Des Plaines River watershed. So the far left column talks about the development phase. We see there Foxconn phase one and the local roads. And as we move to the right, we begin to accumulate this deficit of stormwater detention storage in the first column to the right. So for Foxconn phase one, we saw that the detention deficit was 17 acre feet. For local roads, that's 3.4 acre feet. We move to the next column to the right, depressional storage deficit. For Foxconn Phase 1, that's 43 acre feet, and for the local roads, it's 16.9 acre feet. Those are the same numbers we saw 2 slides ago with the mapping of the depressional storage areas. So then we can start to quantify what's the total stormwater detention and depressional storage deficit for both of these first 2 components within the Des Plaines River watershed, and that is looking at stormwater detention, the deficit is 20.4 acre feet, and for depressional storage, it's 59.9, for a total stormwater storage deficit of 80.3 acre feet for these first 2 components. Now, the next component when we start talking about storage is floodplain. That's what we're going to get into next, but we need to introduce that a little bit and talk about the Des Plaines River floodplain in Wisconsin. As we began the study, we began to realize that the floodplain in Wisconsin, both how it's mapped and how it's regulated, is significantly different than here in Illinois. The FEMA mapping, so the FEMA approved map for the Des Plaines River in Wisconsin was developed from a 2003 sewer pact study. And that study utilized a hydrologic model with rainfall data from 1940 to 1994. So they analyzed all of the storm events from 1940 to 1994 and then did some statistical analysis to determine what is the 100-year flow rate for the Des Plaines River in Wisconsin as you move through that watershed. When we began to review this study, what we found was that the largest rainfall event in this historical series from 1940 to 1994 was August 1978, and that was actually adjusted down. So in the sewer pact study for the FEMA model, that was adjusted down. Additionally, 3 of the 5 largest 48-hour rainfall events, so these are some of the longer duration rainfall events that have the most impact in this watershed. 3 of the 5 largest ones occurred after 1994. And in fact, the largest 10-day event, which is the storm of record, occurred in May 2004. When we looked at the gauge data at the state line, actually the 5 largest floods measured at the state line, so as this water is coming from Wisconsin into Illinois, there's a gauge right at Russell Road. The 5 largest floods occurred after 1994. So this is all data that was not included in Wisconsin's FEMA study for the Des Plaines River. The May 2004 event was 3,500 cubic feet per second coming from Wisconsin into Illinois. July 2017, which we all here of course remember, was 2,830 CFS. So these are significantly larger than what Wisconsin's 100-year flow rate is at the state line, which is 2,600 CFS. On the Illinois side, it's over 3,700 CFS. So really what these numbers are showing in the schematic to the right, shows the Des Plaines River as it's coming from Wisconsin into Illinois. There's a jump in the published flood flows as you cross that state line. It's going from 2,600 CFS to 3,700 CFS. And what we gathered from this, after looking at all this data, and much of it's from the U.S. Geological Survey and other data sources, is that we feel that the floodplain map in Wisconsin, the floodplain mapping in Wisconsin, doesn't accurately represent the 100-year flood event in Wisconsin, which makes it very difficult to accurately assess how a development like Foxconn would affect the watershed if you're going to be using those same models. Also, if the flood flows and the floodplain are underestimated in Wisconsin, if you begin to fill in that floodplain, the accounting of that and that volume is likely underestimated as well. And finally, the flood risk for structures, and this is talking more to Wisconsin rather than Illinois, and we feel that the flood risk for structures near the floodplain in Wisconsin is also underestimated. They've had a lot of development along that corridor. We feel that the floodplain there is underestimated due to the fact that it's generated from an analysis that essentially ended in 1994. We've had so many large events after that. So after talking a little bit about their floodplain, we can now begin to talk about how the floodplain affects the Foxconn development. Here in Lake County and much of the Chicago Collier counties, we require compensatory storage for fill in the floodplain. So if you're going to build a road, build a development, if you're going to fill in part of that floodplain, you need to compensate for that because we realize the value of the storage that a floodplain provides in a watershed. And so throughout our region here, that is required. In Wisconsin, it is only required in what's called a flood storage district. So that has to be officially declared for a watershed or for a specific county, and the Des Plaines River is not a designated flood storage district. Even though in reviewing the floodplain mapping and what was done for that, it meets the technical requirements to be a flood storage district. It was just completed too early, and so it was done in 2003, and that's prior to when they started to designate some of these watersheds as flood storage districts. But what that means is that fill in the floodplain in this watershed in Wisconsin does not need to be compensated for. And the main areas where fill is occurring is adjacent to the culverts and the roadway widening. So Braun Road, which we saw runs through the center of the development, County Highway KR, which is on the south side of the development, and Wisconsin Valley Way, which is running parallel to 94, they all fill in the floodplain of Kilbourne Road ditch. The net fill is 10.7 acre feet, and there is no compensatory storage is being provided for that. Additionally, we calculated that to be 10.7 acre feet. The floodplain, because we feel it is lower than it should be, that fill is likely underestimated. In addition, some of the areas that are outside of the floodplain may in reality be within the floodplain because the limits of the floodplain we feel are underestimated. The aerial photo that you see on the bottom, this is County Road KR, so this is running at the south side of the development. The aerial photo behind it is from before the development started, but you can see that roadway is being widened. Wisconsin Valley Way is what's coming up on the left side heading north. The pink areas are the floodplain, and so when you expand this road as dramatically as they are, and you're expanding it north and south, and you're crossing a creek, you're going to be filling in the floodplain, and that's what a large amount of the floodplain fill is associated with these different roadway crossings. So we've gone through the depressional storage, we've gone through the detention storage, and we've gotten to floodplain storage. And so what we're able to do is start to talk about an accumulated deficit of storage for this site as compared to what it would be if it were in Lake County, Illinois. And that's a summation of these three different components. When we total them all together, on this graph here, we see we've got the floodplain fill in gray, the stormwater detention in orange, and the depressional storage in blue. When we sum all those together, for this area of the development, which is just the first 543 acres, which is phase one and the local roads, it's 91 acre feet. Boiling it down to a gallon per acre, it's 54,600 gallon deficit for every acre of land that's being developed. Again, that is due to the difference in the Lake County requirements versus the Wisconsin requirements. We also felt it was important to project this deficit forward. This graph here on the left side shows a volume of storage deficits. That's an accumulation of stormwater and floodplain deficit in gallons. And along the right-hand side is, as the development continues, the additional acreage of development. So currently, the amount of work that is being done right now, what's under construction, is at 543 acres, and that is Foxconn Phase 1 and the local roads. As we begin to move forward into Foxconn EITM zones 1 and 2, that increases to 2.6 square miles, and the deficit going up at 54,600 gallons per acre also goes up until we get up to the final number on the right is the 5,200 acres. That is looking at if EITM zones 1 and 2, the local roads, and that whole I-94 corridor that we saw in one of the beginning slides, if that were all to be developed, the total deficit gets up to 284 million gallons of stormwater and floodplain storage. So that is a significant number. And how it's significant is when you start to look at how that can impact downstream areas. Particularly, that includes Wisconsin, but also us here in Lake County, Illinois. Sewer PAC, as part of their work for this development, did an analysis of the EITM zone using their FEMA-approved model. So this is the same model that was used to develop the floodplain for the Des Plaines River. And they analyzed both a pre-project and post-project condition for Kilbourne Road Ditch, which is the sub-watershed that we're in, again, using that 1940 to 1994 historical rainfall series. What they did is they analyzed the peak flow rate for each one of those 55 years and then did statistical analysis to determine how that would impact both the 2-year and 100-year return interval flood flows in the Kilbourne Road Ditch watershed. And that is the watershed that then feeds into the Des Plaines River and then comes down here to Lake County. We reviewed that study and had some concerns with that study. The first was, and is the same concern that we had with the floodplain study, there are no large storm events analyzed. So it's very difficult to draw conclusions from how detention basins that are sized for the 100-year event may behave when you do not have any storm events that approach in a 100-year event. We also saw that the volume of floodwater coming off of their site increased due to that development. And finally, when we began to dig deeper in the model and to look at some of the specific output, we generated the graph that you see to the right. So for each one of these 55 years that they analyzed, they pulled out the peak storm event. And so for 1 year, it may have been a storm event in May. For the following year, it may have been a storm event in February. But they pulled out each one of the peak events for this downstream reach right before the Kilbourne Road Ditch flows into the Des Plaines River. And when we looked at that, what we actually found was that the peak, that yearly peak, actually increased more than it decreased as part of this development. So that would mean that of the 55 years, I believe it was 28 of those years, the peak storm event flow rate that was coming out of this sub-watershed actually increased as a result of this development. So moving on from the floodplain to soil erosion and sediment control, the Des Plaines River, according to the IEPA, is impaired for sedimentation, siltation, total suspended solids, with a potential source listed with IEPA as site clearance or land development and redevelopment. So as you have a large tract of land upstream of Illinois developing, we thought it was prudent to investigate how the soil erosion and sediment control was being handled on that site. We were fortunate enough in early September to be able to take an aerial flyover of the site. And that is a photograph that you see on the left. That is looking at Foxconn Phase 1A, and you can see the large amount of disturbed area. Over to the right, so that is up in the headwaters. What we did then is we flew downstream to where Kilbourne Road Ditch, which is coming from the right-hand side and draining towards the left, where that meets up with the Des Plaines River. And as we were able to track Kilbourne Road Ditch as we moved downstream, we saw, from what you would expect from a large construction site, we saw quite a bit of turbid water. And we did see then that entering the Des Plaines River. The Des Plaines River is flowing under 94 there and coming towards us. And you can see as that water on this day, that turbid water was coming from Kilbourne Road Ditch and then turning left and heading south in the Des Plaines River. So a site that large certainly has a lot of challenges. Just the large amount of land itself in that area under construction has a tremendous amount of soil erosion and sediment control needs and potential. We've got linear roadways, Braun Road, County Highway KR, I-94. All of these are linear roadways with waterway crossings. So generally, we're doing, work is being done within the stream at those locations, so a tremendous amount of potential for issues there. And generally, some of the deficiencies that we saw, whether it was in our flyover or during our site visit that we had in December, they had site stabilization issues. There's such a large amount of area open. It's important to get that area stabilized as soon as possible. We have not yet seen that. Construction sequencing, there's a certain sequence as you begin to develop a site, whether it be sediment basins or silt fence. That construction sequencing was not being adhered to, and that was one of the things that was noted in what's to the right, which is a citation. And finally, there's sediment basins, which were also noted in the citation to the right, which was issued by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources on September 14th. And that generally stated failure to implement or maintain soil erosion and sediment control during the period of permit coverage. So at this point, I'll turn over quickly to Jed to talk about the wetland findings.
So within the Foxconn EITM zone, all the impacts have been to isolated wetland areas. They have not needed a core permit for any of the project to date. So for the Foxconn Phase 1 part that Darren's been talking about, it had 13.17 acres of isolated wetland impacts. So these are non-core jurisdictional wetland impacts. And the roadways have had 4.3 acres of isolated wetland impact for a total of 17.47 acres of wetland impact. Under the Wisconsin Act 58 that Darren described earlier, that act required an automatic replacement of wetland at a 2-to-1 replacement ratio. So if you take that 17, back up. We don't know what the local road mitigation has been paid for yet. We only have the numbers for the Phase 1 EITM Foxconn site. So that's 13.17. Again, it was 2-to-1 replacement ratio, so 26.34 acres. They were required to purchase those credits at $61,000 per credit for a cost of $1.6 million and change. The local roads also have to buy a 2-to-1 ratio. This money was placed into a fund for both the local roads and for the Foxconn site. Wisconsin DNR has issued requests for proposals to provide a site to generate those credits. They've issued 2 RFPs. They have not received a suitable site at this point, and so there is actually no mitigation for those sites at this point. If we use Lake County SMC's example for their mitigation, Lake County SMC requires costs at $99,900. You take that math, work it out, there's about a $1 million delta between what Lake County would charge and then what Wisconsin is charging. Our concern is with this additional development up in the watershed in Wisconsin that their land values are going to rise. And they probably have underestimated the cost to actually create, maintain, and manage these wetlands using the amount that they have budgeted for. Within I-94, I think Darren mentioned this earlier, there's 21.336 acres of wetland impact. That's wetlands regulated by the Corps of Engineers and isolated wetland impacts. They're not mitigated at a 2-to-1 ratio. It ranges depending on the type of wetland from 1.0 to 1 to 1.2 to 1. You can see it works out closely to 1 to 1 if you look at the number below at 21.575. All of that mitigation was required to be in the upper Illinois basin. The bank that they ended up putting that credit into was the Fox River, which was not in the Des Plaines River watershed. So to date, none of the wetland mitigation has been provided in the Des Plaines River watershed. What has been provided is either in the Fox River or yet to be determined. Okay, so just a quick summary. In the EITM zone, you had 17.47 acres of isolated wetland impacts. And then for I-94, we had 21.34 at 38.81 total acres of wetland impact, isolated and core jurisdictional. And again, the EAI TM zone is supposed to be mitigated 2-to-1, and it's all supposed to be technically provided in the Des Plaines River watershed, but to date it has not been.
So we'll wrap up now and talk about some of our recommendations based on what we found in our study. The first is recommend a complete and comprehensive restudy of the Des Plaines River watershed, both the hydraulics and the hydrology that spans the Illinois and Wisconsin border. This is something that should be done with the most recent data, whether it be rainfall data or flood flow data, and also with the most state-of-the-art technology with models and GIS. This should be coordinated and led by the FEMA cooperating technical partners and having extensive stakeholder involvement. Now, the cooperating technical partners are the ones that coordinate with FEMA to create these flood maps. Here in Illinois is the Illinois State Water Survey, and in Wisconsin is the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And certainly the Illinois Department of Natural Resources here on our end would be heavily involved as well. Secondly, we recommend that the Des Plaines River watershed should immediately be made a flood storage district in Wisconsin. This would require hydraulically equivalent compensatory storage for all fill within the floodplain. And that should apply to all projects, whether it be a roadway project, private development, or a WSDOT project. Thirdly, the existing depressional storage on each site should be quantified and compensated for as part of the site's stormwater management plan. We saw that again, that was there's 156 acre feet of depressional storage on site. That's very critical to the watershed. That should be quantified and compensated for as part of future development. Future development within the Des Plaines River watershed in Wisconsin should also be required to provide stormwater detention at a 0.15 CFS per acre release rate, which is consistent here with Lake County SMC regulations. Mitigation for fill of wetlands and waters of the U.S. Should be located within the Des Plaines River watershed. If it's impacted in the watershed, that needs to be provided, that mitigation needs to be provided in the watershed. That will allow for no net loss of wetlands and waters in the watershed. This would include WSDOT projects and any of the fee and lieu projects that are currently out for proposal. Finally, the cost per credit acre for that fee and lieu should be reevaluated to make sure that there's enough money there to purchase the land, establish the wetlands, maintain the wetlands, and provide for long-term stewardship of those wetlands that are created. And finally, to prevent further water quality degradation of the Des Plaines River from construction activities, we're recommending that in Wisconsin they require comprehensive soil erosion and sediment control for all construction sites, implement rigorous enforcement inspections to verify compliance, issue violations, and utilize all available legal and financial tools as necessary to achieve that compliance. And finally, these controls should apply to all projects, whether they're private development or linear projects such as WSDOT projects. So that concludes our presentation, and this presentation was a summary of the report, and there is also an executive summary in this PowerPoint, which can be viewed and downloaded at SMC's website.